Stephen J. Garvey, founder, leader of National Citizens Alliance of Canada, NCA. I'd like to welcome you here tonight. This is going to be a really informative session. It's going to pertain to Century Initiative, and this is a corporate group that's pushing for 100 million population by 2100. And then I'm going to tie this into the Power Corporation and its influence on government, and show that all these parties in Ottawa, every single party in Ottawa is stringed to the Power Corporation and other corporate globalists. And these corporate globalists are pursuing UN Agenda 23. They want to turn Canada into a UN globalist village. That's what's happening. And unfortunately, our traditional population is being replaced and will be replaced if this agenda continues. But this is the most important point tonight, is understanding the multi-stringed, multi-controlled opposition in Ottawa. We're going to show you evidence that it doesn't matter which one, any of these parties in Ottawa, doesn't matter which one gets in, it'll be the same globalist agenda that's been going on since the 1970s. This is a fact. Canadians need to wake up. We come across some Canadians almost every day. They live in indoctrinated frames of minds. They exude cognitive dissonance. They have a belief system, but it doesn't correlate to the facts, but they're unwilling to adjust their belief system. So what we do at NCA is we give you the facts, we give you the information so you can make better decisions for yourselves and our country. We want to empower you. We want you to become more self-sufficient, more independent. We believe that by having strong Canadians, the strongest possible, the country will be the strongest possible as well. We don't want Canadians dependent on government. We don't want Canadians indoctrinated by government and media and academia. We want to give Canadians the facts, let them be the strongest. And that's how we're going to create the best country possible, is through the strongest possible Canadians. That's where it starts. And you can tie that into Canadian families. The most united, strongest Canadian families as well will create the best Canada. And that's what we want. And I should qualify before I get into this, NCA is not against immigrants. We have immigrants in the party, and we welcome others in the party. But we have an issue with the mass immigration, sustained mass immigration, the replacement of the traditional populations who founded, created Canada. We have issues with that. We believe in responsible, balanced immigration. We're 100% against sustained mass immigration. So there's a big difference there. We support 50,000 or less total immigration per year. We're the only federal party running in 2019 that supports an end to mass immigration, because we don't have strings to companies like Power Corporation or any other globalist corporation who are pulling the strings on all those globalist sellouts in Ottawa. So I'm going to get right into this information session. There's going to be some great videos tonight that are going to really open your eyes to what's going on. So here it is, 100 million Canadians by 2100. And this has all been streamlined. This has all been made to feel good, this whole Century Initiative. There's a lot of propaganda mixed in here. I'm going to show the video of an excerpt of the immigration minister who's connected to this Century Initiative. And right now, our current population, this website's not up to date, it's 37 million. And there's a projection for 2100 if we continue under the mass immigration of 53 million. by 2100 at least. What this group is proposing is 100 million. And I'm going to get into that, but this would work out to 777,000 immigrants per year in order to reach that target. 53 million is still an incredible amount. That's about a third more. And I'm going to get into the arguments for and against later in this, but I just want to give you an idea of their agenda. Interesting enough, this is a Canadian charitable. This is considered a charity century initiative. Can you believe it? It has a real political agenda, yet it's considered a charity, so it can issue tax receipts. I'm going to go into the first video here. This is at the Canadian Club Toronto, which supports the Century Initiative. And I'm going to show Willa Black at the end. She's one of the directors of the Canadian Club, and I will be referring to, she's also a director, the director of Century Initiative. But here's an excerpt of the current immigration minister, Hassan, and just listen to his arguments. And I'm going to break down the falsities and deception in them.
Migration of newcomers, people who question how, for example, immigrants help our economy, when they're worried about their own economic prospects. We need to listen to them. We need to constantly demonstrate to them that, that immigration benefits our community and our economy. But this is where I need your help. We need to do a better job of reminding Canadians of the argument for immigration. Why is immigration essential not only to the local community but to our collective prosperity? So we can do that in two ways, and both are important. One is through statistics. In 1971, we had 6.6 Canadian workers supporting each Canadian retiree. That number has dropped to 4 to 1. And by 2035, which is not that long to go, we will have that number drop to 2 to 1. We will only have 2 working Canadians supporting each retiree. With a ratio like that, it is very difficult to maintain our generous and cherished social programs, let alone grow them or introduce new programs like pharmacare. So, but better than statistics, I think we can do a better job of telling stories at the local level. Perhaps showing, for example, how hiring a few immigrants helps a company to grow and hire more Canadians. How immigrants are filling jobs that a company just couldn't find Canadians willing to do them. Or how immigrants are getting involved in their communities and making life better for themselves and making those communities more vibrant places to live in. Yet these stories need to be honest as well. And we also need to be clear about the struggles that some newcomers face at the beginning of their journey into a new life in Canada. And in that, I think as a government, we've taken that issue very seriously. We've made sure that we invest adequately in settlement and integration. Since we got into office, our budget for settlement and integration of newcomers has climbed to over 30%. Because we realize that the faster a newcomer succeeds in Canada, the faster they can contribute to our community, and Canada wins. But we need stories, therefore, to show in the vast majority of cases how these newcomers succeed and their children succeed as well. How these newcomers embrace our values, celebrate our freedoms, and because that is one of the reasons that they chose to come to Canada in the first.
So there's the current immigration minister, Hassan, talking to the Canadian Club and by extension Century Initiative. There's some really misleading statements he made, and I have to clarify them. First off, there's been no national dialogue on this radical mass immigration policy that's only ramping up. That's number one. This has been top down, dictated to the Canadian people. As I mentioned, coincidentally, every single party in Ottawa, every single MP in Ottawa supports mass immigration. Isn't that a coincidence? And I should point out there's an aging argument that's used to justify immigration. They say, well, our population is aging. We need to get immigrants in here to replace them. Otherwise, we can't sustain our systems. If you look at the economic literature, that argument is false. There's minimal correlation between dealing with an aging population and immigration. And the main reason is that these immigrants coming in, number one, they're going to start aging as soon as they get here. And then through chain migration, they're bringing very aged immigrants into the countries. Their parents, their grandparents, their uncles, their aunts, they're all aged. So they're only adding to our aged population. Remember that. Another thing too, Hassan, he's very deceptive. Like most of the politicians in Ottawa, if you listen to them, they rarely ever talk about mass immigration. He never mentioned mass immigration. He paints it as immigration. He never talks about sustained mass immigration and its impact. I'm going to go back. You can listen to the director here. This is the director of Canadian Club I'm going to play, and a director of Century Initiative.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Willa Black. I'm a director of the Canadian Club, a proud director of the Canadian Club, also a director of the Century Initiative. Minister Hussen, on behalf of the Canadian Club of Toronto, I'd like to thank you for jump-starting our day with such a strong, positive announcement and message for Canada. As you say, when immigrants succeed, Canada succeeds. We must embrace global leadership on immigration issues with a sound policy built on attracting nation builders and economic contributors. And I know that you're so focused on that, and we're really moving the dial. We must respond to the real challenges of labor market needs. And it's so exciting to hear that you're focused on doing exactly that and that progress is so impressive. And we need to answer your call also to action, Minister, and lend our voices to this important discussion and debate on Canada's future and our path to collective prosperity. We need to share those stories that you talked about this morning. Our economy is thriving, our communities are growing, our reputation on the world stage is as strong as ever, and our moment is now. Minister Hussen, we thank you for your purposeful leadership, and we wish you continued success.
And there you had Willa Black. She's the director of Century Initiative, wanting to push the population to 100 million. She talks about this debate going on, or discussion. I don't see any debate, do you? There's no national dialogue on immigration numbers, is there? I'm not aware of any. I'm not aware of being asked how I feel about immigration and the numbers coming in. And I don't think you have. This is all top down. So she's very deceptive there. She talked about trying to push it on people. They have to keep spinning more and showing examples to justify their agenda. She talks about global leadership. Is this through the UN she's talking about? The UN global leadership through globalists? And then she talked about labor market needs. What about the needs of the Canadian worker to be retrained? What about the needs of Canadians looking for work who don't have work? They don't matter. They just want to keep bringing more immigrants in. And then they just say we're aging. They don't talk about trying to increase the size of traditional families. They don't give a damn. Most families are overtaxed. They can't have more than 1 or 2 kids. But there's no discussion on that. They just want to keep bringing more immigrants in to help pay for all the welfare and the low income. But I'm going to get all into that. I'm going to dig a little deeper here. This is a video of a journalist from the Global Mail. It's very telling, this one.
In a lot of ways, the problems that Canadians face now are caused not by overpopulation, not by crowding, but by its opposite, by the fact that even in our biggest cities, we're distributed fairly thinly over a fairly wide area. This is almost a moment when Canada is sort of up against a wall in a number of areas where the current arrangement of the population isn't large or dense enough to allow for the infrastructure investments and housing investments that could solve those problems. And as a result, it's creating this almost vicious cycle. There's very little instances of
So this is very telling by that Globe Mail journalist. Apparently 80% of Canadians live in cities. And this journalist is talking about more density of our cities. They want to cram more people into the cities, into the suburbs, just like these mega cities like Mexico City, cities like Shanghai, Hong Kong. They're just going to cram everyone in. And it's you're going to have no yard space. It's all going to be multi-level living. But that's their vision, to create these mega globalist cities. It's very clear if you listen to that. Another spin by this journalist, he's supposed to be objective, but he claims immigrants is a key to our success. Immigration. Immigrants are a key to our success. So they're claiming that other people are key to our success as a country. This is really fallacious argument. Rather than saying we create our own success as a people, it's actually demeaning to the Canadian people. Because what they're saying is your success doesn't come from your hard work and your ingenuity, your inventiveness. It comes from just bringing all these third world immigrants into our country. It's a very disingenuous argument. Very demeaning to the Canadian people, this whole agenda. I've got some articles here I'm going to show about this now. And I'm just going to play this one video here too. And this is them again justifying immigration.
Immigration has been the foundation of the success of Canada and will continue to be the success of Canada because we don't struggle with it. We understand it's part of what we are and who we are, and fundamentally for all of us, whether you're born here or you come from a parents who were born someplace else, this is what Canada is about.
Again, in that video, they're dumbing down. They're trying to tie all our success to immigration. Everything that we've achieved as a country, they're saying they're linking it to immigration. They're saying that's who you are. We're all immigrants. That's it. We're all immigrants and refugees. That's what they're peddling. There's no mention of the founders of Canada, the pioneers, the settlers who came here and created our country, who became Indigenous Canadians. But this is what they're peddling. And I'm going to dig now. I talked about this earlier in the week, but this is the team behind it. And a lot of these people are connected to the universities. This woman is from Queen's University's School of Public Policy Studies. This person is an investor. We got more investors. And here's the big one. Andre Desmarais. The Power Corporation is in this. And they have their tentacles on all those parties in Ottawa, every single party in Ottawa, the Desmarais family. Very powerful corporation, but they're fully behind pushing our population to 100 million. We got CIBC, commercial officer, Metropolis project head there. We got a few students here. I guess it makes them look good. Again, more investors, media, investors, marketing. These are the people behind it. And then you got CIBC, and you got all these Cisco companies behind it. But we're going to focus on this gentleman here, Andre Desmarais, because this is the root of this, of what's going on. And if we look here, the federal government, the finance minister's key economic advisors want 100 million Canadians by 2100, two of them. Dominique Barton, who's a global managing director of McKinsey & Company, and Mark Wiseman, a director of investment management, BlackRock Incorporated. And here's Dominique Barton. He's part of the Century Initiative. He's part of a globalist corporation, and they benefit by pushing the population up to 100 million. And there's Mark Wiseman. He's a global head of active equities and chairman of BlackRock Alternative Investors. So these two people, part of the Century Initiative, they're connected to the Desmarais family, are in the federal government advising the finance minister. So they have tentacles in the current government. And I'm going to shift here. I'm just going to show you what they're proposing. This is the population density of Canada. This line here, it signifies 100 kilometers to the US border. You'll see a good percentage of our population is living within 100 kilometers of the US border. You notice the density is greatest in the cities: Winnipeg, Edmonton, Victoria, Toronto, Ottawa. Up here, we're in the Boreal Forest. It's not very hospitable land. There's a permafrost up here. So basically what they want to do to get to 100 million, they're going to make mega densified cities. So these cities will just be completely densified, and they'll be sprawling, and that's what they're looking for. That's what they want. So I don't know how that is good for the Canadian people, but that's what they're proposing. And I'm going to get into the arguments in just a bit. And I'm going to play this video. This is a really good video that questions the whole agenda of replacing our traditional population.
Hey, Jason here. I'm going to share one of the most powerful secrets in the business world, okay?
That same link to the notes. Simply put, the West cannot use other people's children to continue its own civilization. A civilization, I might add, that wherever it has gone has created societies that are the envy of the world, and the reason that people are drawn to it and leave the failure and dysfunction of their own civilizations behind in a hope of enjoying the fruits of prosperity, freedom, and liberalism that Western people have built for themselves over centuries. The paradox is that as the West and countries like Canada willingly give away that which was bequeathed them through the toil, blood, sweat, and tears of their ancestors, they are most likely also destroying the hopes for peace and social cohesion for all, if something is not changed very soon, as the numbers that are set to arrive and are on their way are so great that the Western society they hope to live in and benefit from will, for all intents and purposes, be a thing of the past. So remind me again, why is it such a great idea that virtually every single country in the West is going down the same road or the same drain as Canada? What are you?
So there you had that great statement, and basically this mass immigration agenda, as we've said time and time again, the sustained mass immigration since the 1970s is literally replacing our traditional populations. This is a fact. Just look at the demographic data. So we ask, as this gentleman asked, what will be left when traditional Canadians are replaced? Is this what our forefathers envisioned for our country? That our traditional populations would be replaced? To turn Canada into literally a third world globalist UN village? That's what they're pushing for, without question. Is this something good for our country? Why isn't this part of the dialogue? There's really no dialogue except in alternative media. But these are questions every Canadian needs to consider. This is what they want. These globalists, like the Desmarais family, do not care. It's all about profit, control, power. That's what it's all about. All these parties in Ottawa are stringed to this agenda. That's why they all support sustained mass immigration. It's a fact. So we're going to dig deeper tonight. This is on Power Corporation of Canada. We're going to start to look at them now, because you need to understand Power Corporation of Canada in order to understand the multi-controlled opposition in Ottawa. The Power Corporation of Canada, not surprisingly, is aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals, UN Agenda 2030, which Stephen Harper adopted for Canada in 2015, and the current federal government is implementing. And if you look further into this, they even have a section on, if you look at their governance model, it's almost a mirror of the federal government, of everything they do. And they have affirmative action. It's all about tolerance. It's all about inclusion. It's all about implementing UN Agenda 2030. It mirrors the federal government and other governments in Canada. Just look at the diversity section of Power Corporation. It's all about promoting diversity as our greatest strength. It's all about inclusion. Affirmative action like the federal government. And they're pushing this human rights. Inclusion, human rights, social responsibility, all this stuff. But you should look into the Power Corporation. There's a complete overlap. This is ironic anti-corruption. You could argue that this company is probably the most corrupt company in Canada, without question, through their puppeteering of the federal government and the parties in there. That is a form of corruption. It's definitely anti-democratic, what they're doing. And if we dig in, we're going to dig into the Power Corporation. Now, they have their tentacles on every single party. They were tied to Pierre Trudeau. When he left office, he went straight into the boardroom of the Power Corporation. Brian Mulroney, 1971, was a lawyer for Paul Desmarais of the Power Corporation. Daniel Johnson Jr. and Paul Martin did stints working for Paul Desmarais in the Power Corporation. Andre Desmarais, who's part of the Century Initiative, married Francine Chrétien, the daughter of the former Prime Minister Chrétien. And Paul Desmarais sold Canada's steamships line to Paul Martin, which he made his fortune with, and apparently he ripped Canada off on the taxes. 1983, Mulroney won the Conservative leadership. And apparently in 1976, Paul Desmarais is said to have bankrolled his campaign. The Desmarais family has ties to the Quebec government. Charest, he was completely stringed. 1994, Brian Mulroney brokers Power Corp's entry into China. (1996). This is on the board of Power Corporation. Former Ontario Premier Bill Davis. Former Federal Finance Minister Don Mazinkowski. And its international advisory boards includes Pierre Trudeau and Brian Mulroney. In 2000, John Ray, who's part of the Power Corporation, masterminds the election campaigns for Chrétien, Jean Chrétien. 2005, Brian Mulroney introduces Stephen Harper to Paul Desmarais to ensure that they're on friendly terms. And then he gets Desmarais connections in the cabinet that include Maxime Bernier and Peter MacKay, who are connected to the Desmarais family. In 2006, John Ray, who is part of the Power Corporation, runs Bob Ray's campaign. And Bob Ray is part of the NDP, so you can see the tentacles in all these parties. It's unbelievable. The Power Corporation has major ownership in mutual funds and the finance sector, insurance sectors in Canada. They control a lot of our pensions, pension money. And that's the reason you never hear any of these parties in Ottawa. This is another thing. They never talk about CPP and the big ripoff with that, because the Desmarais family controls all those pension funds, at least a lot of them. Those parties are all stringed to the Desmarais family, the Power Corporation, so they're not going to bite the hands that feeds, so they don't talk about it. We're the only party that does. That's another clue. If we dig deeper here, this is another article on it. It says here the Desmarais family have strong connections to Canada's 4 major political parties, and include the Bernier party on top of that now. And it goes into all their all the ties to Martin, to Harper, on and on. And then it talks about the Desmarais family has close ties to the World Bank, the Rockefeller family, the United Nations. They have ties to the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg, on and on. They have ties to a lot of universities, McGill, Queen's, pushing their agenda there. In this article, it's considered an oligarchy, and it's an attack on democracy because they're controlling everything. They're dictating. They're connected to the Trilateral Commission. It's on and on. And the board of the CD is on the board. The Desmarais are on so many boards, bankers boards, all kinds of corporations, Canada Pacific Railway, Canadian Chamber of Commerce, on and on, all these universities. It's unbelievable, the influence. And then if we dig a little deeper, we can look into Bernier here. This is unbelievable. He was when he was the Ministry of Industry, he was pushing this what's called the social economy initiatives, and this is tied to George Soros and the Tides Foundation. And he praised the merits of the so-called social economy. And we find out that the current director of his party was the deputy director of the social economy initiatives and the Human Resources Social Development of Canada and the Social Studies Humanities Research Council. And she has ties to George Soros funded Tides Foundation. So that's very troubling. And she's tended meetings that included that were connected to the Power Corporation, the World Bank, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the Trudeau Foundation. So this is unbelievable. So I'm going to play a couple more videos here to give you the insight on what's going on.
United States through various think tanks and corporations and boards of directors, but also they even have connections with the major European financial dynasties, including the Rothschilds. A member of a European Rothschild bank is also on the board of directors of Power Corporation. Their influence within Canada is especially interesting to the political class. There's not a single prime minister in Canada since the 1970s that is not in some way connected with the Desmarais family. So you had Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who had close connections to the Desmarais and Power Corporation, and after he left office, he joined the board of Power Corporation. Of course, Brian Mulroney rose through the ranks at Power Corp. And has been a long-time family ally. Paul Martin also rose through the ranks. Jean Chrétien's daughter married Andre Desmarais. So they're actually family connections in some instances. And then with Stephen Harper today, we also have connections through some of his ministers who have either come from Power Corporation or left to go join Power Corporation. And apparently the connections between Harper and the Desmarais were facilitated by Brian Mulroney, no less. And so they have connections also with Bob Rae from the NDP, with the Parti Québécois, so all of Canada's main political parties, and especially in Quebec, where the Desmarais family are based, right here in Montreal. And they have extensive connections with Quebec's current premier, who may not be premier for a couple more weeks, Jean Charest, and the Liberal Party here, as well as the Parti Québécois. So they really have their fingers in every dish, so to speak.
Once again, Andrew Gavin Marshall.
I'm going to play another excerpt here, which talks about the controlling of all these parties, how they're stringed, and it doesn't matter which one gets in. So it's pretty ingenious of the Power Corporation, other globalist corporations. They basically bought out all these parties. So it doesn't matter which one of these you vote for, because they're still going to get their agenda in.
You know, and it's not really about money. You know, at some point, these elites get so much money that I don't think it's about money so much as it is about power. You know, that money is nothing but a tool to provide a means to control government. Okay, for example, the Paul De Marais was involved with an organization called the Canadian Competitive Council, you know, which basically wrote the entire security and prosperity partnership agreements between the United States and Canada. I mean, this man is directly working to get Canada to divest itself of its national sovereignty. You know, people are protesting right now against the oil pipelines coming out of the tar sands project in Alberta, you know, and at the same time, these guys are investing in railways, knowing that the pipeline will never get built because they're funding the protest against the pipeline, while at the same time they're investing in extra tankers so that they could move it by rail. They never really wanted to build the pipeline in the first place. So, you know, what happens is they end up buying both sides of a conflict and playing them against each other, knowing what the outcome will be, you know, and they do the same thing in politics. You know, you could say, oh, Paul De Marais controls the Liberal Party. Well, he controls the Conservative Party as well. And when it comes election time, it doesn't matter whether you vote Conservative or Liberal. The guy that Paul De Marais has put in that position is still going to get elected Prime Minister.
So there you have the facts there, and that's pretty real, raw, factual information there on what's happening. As I said at the beginning of this broadcast, all those parties in Ottawa, every single one is stringed to these to the Power Corporation and other globalist corporations. They're what's called controlled opposition. It doesn't matter which one you vote for. It's going to be the same. That's why nothing ever changes. You just have a different face, a different color, a different party name in there, and it's the same stuff going on. So this is very troubling. This is an attack on our democracy. Everyone needs to accept this fact. The facts are there. It's there. The Desmarais family has strings on all these people in Ottawa. And it's shown that. And their agenda is UN Agenda 2030. The corporation adopts it. All their rhetoric is about diversity, inclusion, and pushing our population to 100 million. They want to turn this into a UN globalist village. That's what's going on. This is an attack on our democracy right now. All Canadian people have been tricked. They've been fooled. They've been asleep. They need to wake up, because you're losing your country every single day. Every single day. So the good news is National Citizens Alliance of Canada, NCA, we are 100% grassroots, uncontrolled opposition. We have no strings to any globalist corporation, and we will not allow any. That would completely undermine everything we stand for. So that's not going to happen. But the obvious difference here, NCA is against mass immigration. We support responsible, balanced immigration of 50,000 or less. All those other parties in Ottawa, they all support sustained mass immigration. All of them. And some of them are deceptive to how much, but they all support sustained mass immigration. Because they're connected to Desmarais family and other globalists. That's the reason. They're just bought and sold. Second thing is, National Citizens Alliance supports major reform of CPP. Canadian people have been getting ripped off for decades. The return on their investment into the Canada Pension Plan is almost criminal, what they're getting back. We believe we could triple the benefits to Canadian seniors if we get in there and we reform it. None of those parties in Ottawa touch CPP. None of them touch it. Why? You got to ask yourself, why do they not touch it? Because they're stringed to the Power Corporation. They're stringed to other globalist corporations, but mainly the Power Corporation, which controls nearly all of the mutual funds handling our pensions. That's the reason. The second thing is the Bank of Canada. We want to, the Bank of Canada, in our opinion, is at the pinnacle of crony capitalism. We're paying $64 billion a year in debt service payments nationally and growing to banks. The federal government is paying over $30 billion. So we want to reinstitute the Bank of Canada of 1934. Guess what? None of those parties in Ottawa touch the Bank of Canada. None of them touch it, and they don't want to talk about. All they just say there'll be too much inflation. That's all they say, because they're stringed, because they're controlled by corporations like the Power Corporation and the banks. That's it. So I hope Canadians really take a close look at this presentation tonight, digest the facts, and make the best decision going forward. If you keep supporting those crony entrenched parties in Ottawa, all of them, it doesn't matter which one, you're going to get the same. If that's what you want, keep doing it. If you want a major reform of this country, you got to get behind NCA, because we're the only ones that are pushing it. We're the only ones against mass immigration. We're the only ones that's going to do a major reform of CPP. We're the only ones that's going to deal with the Bank of Canada. We're the only ones that's going to withdraw Canada from UN Agenda 2030 and the UN Agenda 21, which the globalist conservatives signed us onto. So just remember those things. And I have to stress, in closing, we're not against immigrants, but we believe in protecting our identity, our heritage, our cultural norms of Canada. We believe that we have a responsibility to protect and enhance our traditional populations, our Euro-Canadians, our First Nations, our Inuit, our Métis. And in terms of immigration too, the mass immigration, there's important things that I'm going to add here in closing, that it's costing $40 billion a year, taxation negative. The new immigrants coming in consume more services than taxes paid, to the tune of $40 billion a year. The administration of immigration is $24 billion and growing. It's a huge industry. Through artificial intelligence, there's a projection that we could lose 40% of our jobs. Yet they're peddling this immigration on us, this mass immigration. It does not make sense. It doesn't make sense. Environmentalists like David Suzuki even said that Canada is already overpopulated. Yet these strain-controlled parties in Ottawa, they want to push it up to 53 million, potentially 100 million. Yet we're already overpopulated. Around 95,000 hectares of farmland are bulldozed every year. And a lot of that is prime farmland around towns. And that's attributed to this mass immigration, the pressure from that. There's increased inflated housing costs due to mass immigration. And these housing costs are it's attributed to 80% from immigration. A lot of Canadian young families can't afford houses now if you're living in Toronto, Vancouver. That's a reality. There's more crime, more pollution. There's erosion of traditional identity, heritage, cultural norms. Imagine that, 100 million, all from the third world coming in, pushing our what's going to happen? All the densification, all the crime, the increased ethnic enclaves, and also the mass immigration. It's lowering the per capita wage. Per capita income of the individual goes down. There's displacement of Canadian workers. There's replacement of our traditional population. None of this makes sense. That's what NCA says. None of this makes sense. And we got to ask, who is benefiting from this? Who is benefiting? The first thing is, these string politicians in Ottawa, these controlled parties who are just flip-sides of the same thing, they're getting votes. All these new immigrants coming in, they tend to vote for them. Also, there's more taxes paid, the more people that come in. And these select commercial interests, like the Power Corporation, developers, banks, low-income employers, investors, insurance industry, etc., benefit because there's more consumers. That's why they want them. They want more money, more profit, more power, more control. But the bottom line is most Canadians do not benefit. Your life is going to go down with this. So speak your voice. If you like the message tonight, share it with as many Canadians as possible. We have to wake up, Canadians. There's a radical major transformation underway. You can see it. We have a pseudo-democracy. It's all controlled, contrived. It doesn't make sense. We have to fight back. We are losing the country we love right now. Thank you.